Hi, I'm Jenna and I have dissociative identity disorder. I've been educating and making content online for several years now because people have a lot of questions. However, I've noticed that a lot of people are asking the same questions. So I decided to make a FAQ video. I've made a list of the 25 most asked questions. I'm gonna make a list in the information of the video, so you should be able to hyperlink to each question, scroll through, find the one that you have, or just watch the whole video because probably there's another question in there that you were like, oh yeah, I wanna know the answer to that one too. So let's go. The first section I have titled Questions About Alters. If you're already confused, what's an alter? An alter is the technical term for an alternate state of consciousness. This is another personality. Some people call them headmates, like a roommate, but one that lives in your head. No matter what you call them, that is the part that gets shifted into when I am not in the front. Let's get into your questions. Question 1, where do alters get their names? Everybody wants to know where they get their names. And it will vary from system to system. A system is a group of alters working together in one body. That means a person with multiplicity. Freebie for you. So, where do they get their names? For us, some already had their names. That was their name. Devi, Anthony, J.A. Those were just their names. When I met them, they were like, hey, I'm J.A. Others didn't. When E emerged, I was calling her the angry teenage girl. But that's kind of cumbersome, and she didn't exactly appreciate that either. So she was like, let me come up with my own name. And she kept referring to the little girl and to him. And so those were other alters that didn't have a name but had enough distinction that E was referring to them. And when I met them, they also wanted to go about picking their own name. So where they get their names varies wildly. And some people know where their alter's name came from. In my case, I have no idea. If they didn't pick it, they just had it, and why, when, where? I mean, your guess might be as good as mine. Question 2, can alters go away, fuse, die, disappear? Any variety of that. So yes, alters can fuse, they can go dormant. New alters can be formed in response to new trauma that happens. So even as an adult, alters can continue to appear. They can disappear. And in the terms of disappear, like go dormant. Fusing, so the best way I can describe it is like, if you have two puzzle pieces, one is like a cat and the other is a cozy fireplace. This is a fireplace, this is a cat, but when you put them together, it makes a new picture. The traits of both are fully still there. They don't disappear, but the shape of it is something new. So alters can fuse and it makes something new, but what was originally there is still there. Question 3, what is it like to not be in the front, in control of the body? So when an alter is not in the front, they may be aware and co-conscious, so they might be aware of what's going on in the front. They may be in a kind of unconscious sleep state and not aware, or they may be aware but in the inner world. The best way I can describe the inner world is it's kind of like a construct that the brain makes for alters to exist in when they are conscious but not conscious of what is happening on the outside. It is kind of dreamlike. It is a little more vivid than a dream, a little less vivid than reality. Subset to that question, what is it like for me, Jenna, when I'm not in the front? Usually I am co-conscious. That means I'm aware what's happening. I'm just not in control. And switching often feels kind of like getting sleepy and falling back into myself. I think that's kind of the best way I know how to describe it. Question 4, what is it like talking with alters? So for me, Jenna, if I'm in the front and there's an alter co-conscious, so they are aware, it's like having a chit chat in my head, except I'm not, like, I don't know what they're going to say. It's like having a chit chat with a different person. You don't exactly know what to expect from their answers, but it's happening in my head. If an alter is not co-conscious, it is like calling back to them. So like if someone is in another room and you're like, hey, can you hear me? Hey, can we have a talk? It's like that, but once again, internal. Alters can have conversations with themselves in the inner world, but when I'm in the front, I almost never hear those. I'm most likely to hear those if I'm on the edge of sleep. It seems that kind of state lowers dissociative barriers just a little, makes it easier to hear alters. But even then, I almost never hear their conversations when they're in the inner world. Question 5, who's the original? Who's the core? Who were you before you had D.I.D? So according to our current understanding, everyone experiences a fragmented sense of consciousness until a certain age, when the brain coalesces that fragmented sense of consciousness into a unified stream, which is between 4 and 9, depending on the person. So according to that theory, there isn't an original. We were all in this state of fragmented consciousness, and our brain didn't unify us. It kept us separate because of trauma. So if you think about an orange, it has all those segments, and all of those segments are part of the original orange, but it has a skin unifying it. Well, you are the orange with the skin. We are the orange without the skin, and our segments are separated. So this separation keeps the knowledge of trauma to 1 or 2 segments. Now, there is a host, and that is the alter who fronts the most. That would be me, Jenna. But just because I front the most doesn't make me any less a segment of this orange than any of the other segments. Question 6, if one alter learns something, does everybody else have access to that knowledge? Not necessarily. There are amnesic barriers between some of us. Jen can solve the Rubik's Cube. I can't do that. And that burns my britches. She's the only one who can solve it. However, we do share most information. We don't have a lot of amnesia. So if one of us learns it, it's very likely that the others of us will know it, but it's not a sure thing. Question 7, how come you're aware of each other? We didn't in the beginning. I've been in therapy for 6 years now, and we've been learning to communicate, to cooperate, to live together. But in the beginning, I just thought it was me. Until E started yelling at me in the head, I thought I was the only one in my head. And E knew about some others, but not even all the other alters knew about others. So there is an idea going around that, well, if you have D.I.D, you don't know it. I didn't, but that's what growth and healing is all about. At some point, you learn and you move forward. This next section is for questions about switching. Question 8, what does switching feel like? So for me, I don't have a lot of amnesia, which means I have memory between parts and between switches. And it may feel different for someone who has a lot of amnesia and is not aware of switching after a certain point. But it's like changing a filter on a camera or on social media. You're looking at the same thing, but it looks very different. Your feelings, thoughts, perceptions, even of color around this thing are totally different. So even though I remember, I no longer feel like the me who was a minute ago. I still feel like me. I'm me. I'm not the me who was here a minute ago. I feel very differently than that me, but I still feel like me. A subset to this question is, do you feel a switch coming on? Yes, sometimes. We call it feeling switchy, being switchy. And we can feel drowsy. A lot of times we start losing our train of thought, feel dissociative, spacey, like having a hard time focusing on what's happening. And like I mentioned before, it can feel like I'm falling into myself. And that's how it feels like for me. I do sometimes also have physical sensations like a switching headache. Sometimes a harder switch will have a shiver with it. It's a skill. So alters that switch more frequently with each other, switches can be very easy, like a handoff. And if they switch less frequently, it can be more difficult. And that's for voluntary switches. There are also, most switches I would say are triggered switches. We'll get into voluntary switches in a minute. Question 9, how often do we switch? It varies a lot. Sometimes we won't switch for days or weeks. Other times we will rapid switch throughout the day. On average, we may switch a couple times a day. Question 10, is there control over switching? So in the beginning, like switches are triggered. Alters are brought forth by some sort of stimulus, whether positive or negative. But working with cooperation and communication, we can use positive triggers for an alter with their permission to help facilitate a switch if there's reason for that other alter to be out, if they just want to be out, whatever have you. But it definitely takes practice. Question 11, how long do switches take? Switches can be instant. Those are usually the triggered switches, boom, somebody else is in the front. However, there's been days of switchiness, of fogginess between one alter and another, and that's pretty difficult. For us these days, switches are usually fairly easy and not distressing. Every now and then there's still hard switches. Question 12, what does blendy feel like? For me, blendy can feel confusing. There's combined traits of different alters without a defined sense of identity. And so there's this lack of ability to know what to expect. Like I might go to eat a favorite food and then it doesn't taste right and I don't feel the way I normally feel about other things. So it can be a little disorienting. This next section is on our personal life. Question 13, do you have a job? Can you work? The answer to this, of course, will vary from system to system. We are what is considered high functioning, which I want to roll my eyes at that term. But we've held jobs in the past that are outside the home. We do, however, have some chronic physical issues. So we're writers, and you can find our stuff at JE Craft Books, shameless plug. So we do work, we work from home, and that's because of some physical issues rather than our D.I.D. Before, our favorite job was working in a vet. We were managing the kennels, which basically was us doing our own thing with the animals all day. It was ideal. So question 14, we're married. Did all of our alters date our husband? How did that work? So we didn't know we had D.I.D. when we were dating. Our system was largely dormant until we'd been married for quite a while. And people want to know, well, how does that work then within marriage? Do you all consider yourselves married? We consider the body to be married. And our husband has an individual relationship with each alter, like you would with different people. And how that looks really varies from alter to alter. Question 15, does the hubs have a favorite alter? If he does, he's smart enough not to say anything. That would probably cause a civil war, I'm not gonna lie. Question 16, we have children. How is pregnancy on the male alters? Our system was largely dormant when we got pregnant. However, Jen was host at the time, and she was gender neutral to masculine, and pregnancy is a very feminine experience. We experienced our first fusion without even realizing that we had D.I.D. We had a dream that there was a brother and sister, and they lived in separate houses because it wasn't safe for the sister, but now the sister was going to come back and live with the brother. We woke up from that dream panicked because even though we didn't understand that we had D.I.D, we kind of understood at its core that we had pushed feminine aspects of ourselves away and they were going to come back home. And it was terrifying, but it just happened, and all of a sudden we were interested in jewelry and makeup, and we had never had any interest in those things at all. And so during the course of our pregnancy, we had a fusion, and that's what I consider myself as the product of the fusion of Jen and this feminine aspect. Other alter that we don't know. So pregnancy caused a fusion, but still most of the system was dormant for it. Question 17. On the heels of that, everyone wants to know how the other alters feel about being a mom. As survivors of childhood trauma, parenting is very important to all of us, and the safety and protection of our children is very important to all of us. We say we're all mom. So it doesn't matter who's in the front, that person is mom. And that's how we parent. That's how we go. And we all do have different styles. Lil is going to have a very different interaction with the kids than J.A., but it's still all mom. This next section is going to be about therapy. Question 18, what is the diagnosis process like? The diagnosis process is going to be different for everyone. The average right now to be correctly diagnosed with D.I.D. takes 6 years. In part because there are a lot of other things that are comorbid with D.I.D. In part because there are symptoms with D.I.D. that are also symptoms in plenty of other disorders. So it takes a long time. What will normally happen is there will be time in therapy for the therapist to observe and assess, but there are also assessments that they'll give to come alongside their observation and kind of determine whether or not what they're observing is in line with these assessments as well. For us, we were in therapy for about a year before alters became apparent because we were having trauma responses and we knew we needed help. We didn't know the extent of it though. Question 19. What do you do in therapy, and does everyone participate? For us, usually whoever is in the front on therapy day/time is the one who goes to therapy. Our therapist works with each alter individually to help them with the things that they're going through and what they need. If there's an alter who is having trouble, we might see if they want to come forward specifically to talk about the issues they're dealing with. After being in therapy for several years, we started doing trauma processing, largely using EMDR, and we've got that whole journey on our YouTube channel. Question 20. With therapy and healing, will your alters go away /fuse / will you become one person? Multiplicity is our brain's first language. If it learns to exist with all of us together, that will be like learning a second language. You've seen with people who are bilingual, a lot of times in times of stress, they revert back to their first language. It's similar with multiplicity. Studies have shown a lot of times if someone fuses, all the alters final fusion come together into one, that sometimes during stress or trauma, fusions can break apart. Because of that, we're not focused on fusing or not fusing. We're just focusing on the health of everybody in the system. Will that happen? We don't know. It might. It might not. But our focus is on everyone being healthy and happy. Finally, miscellaneous questions. Question 21. What is your favorite media representation? My all-time favorite media representation is a movie called What If It Works? It shows the challenges of things like amnesia, of trying to build relationships, while showing positives of system cooperation and growth. It hints at the complexities of the disorder. And yeah, so hands down, I recommend that one every time. Question 22. What do you think about your soul? We think of our soul as a beam of pure light passed through a prism. When that light passes through the prism, it separates into component colors. And those component colors are very distinct. Red is not yellow, is not green, is not blue. However, we think that when we die, we will no longer be passed through the prism, and we will still be that expression of pure light, but no longer separated into component parts. But who knows? 23. Do you have different political/religious views, and how does that work? We do have some different views. Ironically, if we have some very different views politically, when it comes to voting day, we vote on who to vote for. We're pretty much, that's how we solve things in our system, is we take a vote and majority rules. That seems to be the fairest way to do that. There can be a lot of debating that goes into that beforehand though. For instance, we debated for about a year before being open online about our disorder. There was a lot of talk before we were finally ready to make a decision on that. Spiritually, we're all theists. We all believe in God, a God, some God. But after that statement, it varies between altar to altar. And we have to learn how to accept and exist with each other's differences. I think that gives us practice, though, for like life, because everyone has our own ideas, and we all have to learn how to coexist with those differences. Question 24. I have a friend/partner/know somebody with D.I.D. How can I best help them? One of the best pieces of advice I can give you is just be their friend. They have a therapist, or they should, but that's not your role. Your role isn't to be a therapist or to solve all their problems. What they need is somebody to walk with them in this journey, and it is a hard journey, and it feels very lonely to do. And if you have someone who has trusted you enough to let you know that they have this disorder, just be there with them in it. And everyone is different. Some systems may want you to ask who's fronting, and some may not. Some may want help with grounding if they're very dissociative, and some may not. The best way to find out is to be curious and ask your friend. Like, how much of this are you comfortable talking about? Would you like me to ask questions? Would you like me to do research on my own? Ask your friend what they're comfortable with and how they want that interaction to look like. But in the end of the day, just be there for them, all of them. Sidebar, it may also be good to be aware that because of amnesia and memory lapses, your friend may not know something that you told them in a previous conversation. They might not remember a date that y'all set up to do a thing. So be patient, and gentle reminders are always a plus. And finally, question 25. I think I might have D.I.D. Now what? Please know you're not alone. I know it feels scary and lonely. The best piece of advice I can give is find a therapist, one who specializes in dissociative disorders if you can. There are a lot of disorders that have overlapping symptoms with D.I.D. And a therapist who specializes in those type of disorders will be able to help you tease that out. But if you think you have this disorder, you also have trauma, and therapy is going to be life-changing. I also highly recommend reading the book Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors by Jenna Fisher. It is absolutely invaluable and covers from like PTSD up through polyfragmented D.I.D. And is just so helpful no matter where you fall in that spectrum. So, as you've seen, D.I.D. is complex. I hope this video has helped to answer some of your questions. I'm sure even after all this, some of y'all have some more questions. I still have some more questions. A ton more research needs to be done on this disorder. And I hope that as we raise awareness and lessen stigma, more research will be happening. Thanks. We'll catch you later. Bye. Bonus FAQ. What are your pronouns? Everybody wants to know that. We go by she, they in general, but whoever's out will have their specific pronouns. J.A. like she, her, Caleb, he, him. So it varies, but we know it's complicated, so we're not picky about that. Like, we get that this is what the body looks like. So as long as you're trying in good faith, we're all good. Do you feel like this is a disorder? I mean, I feel like this is a neurodivergence. My brain did a different thing. There were some very disordered aspects to it. And as we've been in therapy, we've been working on the disordered aspects of that. As we heal, we might still be multiple. So that multiplicity is a neurodivergence. And honestly, it's been a gift. It's what helped us survive. What is the inner world like? Y'all, that is just one of the strangest things about this whole D.I.D. to me. Like, honestly, I can't, like, there's feeling, there's sensation. If an altar touches another altar, you feel it. But it's like feeling, if I said, hey, do you know what it feels like to have someone run their fingers down your cheek? You can almost feel, there's that ghost of a feeling. If I said, think about the smell of coffee. You can smell it. It's not as strong as if you were actually smelling it, but it's there. And that's what feelings and sensations in the inner world is like. For us, our inner world, there's a large house, forest, an ocean, some mountains off in the distance. And some of the things we can change and affect, and some of the things we can't. It's wild. I think the best thing I can relate it to is kind of like lucid dreaming, where there's some control, but there's also still this dream landscape and things have symbolic meaning and your brain is just coming up with stuff and you're like, oh, well, that's interesting. What's up with animal alters, non-human alters, all of that? All right, so D.I.D. is formed in the mind of a traumatized child. We'll start there. Whatever the brain finds helpful for survival, that's what it does. Maybe the family dog is the only one in the family who gets love. The brain might come up with a dog alter. Maybe the brain thinks that the only place that would be safe is in the fairy tale. And the brain comes up with a fairy alter. Like, maybe you're in a really not great religious environment and being told that you have demon possession and that's why you're acting like this. So the brain might clothe one of the alters like it's a demon because that's what it was told it was. So there are non-human alters because that's what the brain of the child did for making sense of its reality and surviving. On the heels of that, do I have a non-human alter? Yeah. We assume Alnilam is an alter. She's a tiger. She doesn't talk. She doesn't front. She exists mostly in the inner world, but there's been some interactions that let us know that she probably is an alter. And we don't exactly know why, because D.I.D. is complicated. Finally, will I come speak at your thing? I do speaking engagements. I'm hoping to have a website, and whenever I get that, I can put the link for that in this video. But in the meantime, that can be accessed via our Patreon if you want to have us come and speak at your thing. All right, that's it. I got a day to do. This has been a long video. I hope y'all have a good day. Bye. On this. Let's start that over again. Yep, there's breakfast. All right. Ah, my nose is itchy. Okay, the first section I'll be in. Let's try. Okay. Oh. So many. So many of the questions, though. Close, not quite. You can come in. I was right in between things, so good timing. Come in, make the noise. Ugh. I don't normally film this long, but I'm making a monster video to answer them all. It's like one ring to rule them all. Oh, your shirt. It is covered in pollen.
How about my pants?
Your pants look good. You were able to brush those off, but your shirt you might want to take off and like whip around outside to get some of that out. Not inside.
On the rock.
Pollen.
On the rock.
Pollen. All right, we'll put it back on now. Let's try that again. How do I land this plane? Oh, that's the one.